Rich Sander here. Today we have Emily Newman here, and we're going to talk about a bunch of different stuff today. And our subject is about what good is it? And this is Moral Misfits. So today I have a little bit of bad news. The great Amazing Randi has passed away. If you're a skeptic, then you know this individual. The Amazing Randi was a famous skeptic. He was a kind of a short guy, but a big personality. He is one of the few people that really brought skepticism into the American lexicon, that really said, okay, what is going on here? Whether it was magicians or soothsayers, or he would always say people doing woo-woo, certain types of preachers that were conning their congregants. He was the guy in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that was out there really showing people what it is to be a good skeptic and how to think critically. And he's one of those guys that, for us that are secular-minded, atheists, humanists, science-minded people, he's one of our heroes. And he has a James Randi Foundation that had a prize of $1 million for anybody who could prove him wrong, that they could fool him in terms of having something that was supernatural that they were doing, and that they could prove that. And nobody was able to take that $1 million prize. So if you ever have anybody who wants to prove something to you, say, well, just go to the James Randi Foundation and apply for that prize. Then you could get $1 million. I doubt that you will. But if you want to support what the James Randi Foundation is, go to their website. They will continue to do that prize. That is his legacy, what they're doing. For scientific skepticism, scientific method, that's a good way of doing it. So, it's sad. He lived to be 92 and was a great person, and we'll miss him dearly and stuff. So today I have Emily Newman here, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things today. Really around what James Randi was about. It was like, what good is it? What is this skepticism? How do we think about certain things? And is it good? Is it right? Is it something good for us? So today we're going to hit a few different little subjects on that topic, and Emily's going to join in with her viewpoint, because she's a humanist, part of the Washington Ethical Society, and also works for the American Humanist Association. So welcome, Emily, to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Well, it's great to have a chance to talk to you and to have this conversation about what good is it. And right now in the American psyche and timing, we have voting going on right now. We have a big election next week, and that's a big thing going on right now, and everybody's or most people are really concentrating on this. But one of the things that I still see is that there are some people who are not only skeptical about voting, I think that they're either apathetic about it, or they think that it's cynical, that, both sides are the same, it's not worth it, my vote doesn't count. I think that we do have a way in our culture, or ways to go in our culture, to really talk about this so people understand that it is important. I mean, it's important to you, right?
Oh, definitely. I was excited that Washington, D.C., where I currently live, made it easier for us to vote early, to do drop-off ballots, to mail them in. And I feel very privileged that I didn't have to stress about it the way that other people in our country have been doing. And I luckily also haven't had to be online for hours the way that people have. But I appreciate all those who have made that determination to do so.
So have you run into some people that are saying, I'm not going to vote there. It's all the same. It's not, my vote's not going to count. Washington, D.C. is going to go for one guy, and, why would I bother?
Well, in DC, although we are pretty blue, I think we are also very politically minded. And, so I haven't heard any local folks talking about not voting. If anything, I've actually heard increased energy, especially around like some of the more local elections, because the idea of DC statehood is still prominent. And we want to make sure that DC gets a stronger voice. And I think that, we've seen lately, some clashes between the federal government and our local government. So we are feeling very much like, we need to be loud about the fact that we are still Americans, and they're, the people that live here, even if they're representing other lands, should make sure that they're hearing from us as well.
I think we fought a war about taxation without representation. And I think
Familiar.
I think Puerto Rico and
Yep.
American Samoa and DC. I mean, these people are getting taxed, but they're not able to vote like the rest of us and stuff. So I think that's important and stuff. But there are resources for people. And back in the spring, I sat down with John Wagner, and he's with Secular Coalition for America, New York. And here he's talking about the different resources that a person, if they wanted to get active, or if they're thinking about it, because I think what good is it in terms of getting involved if you don't take some kind of effort to understand issues and understand candidates and to make an informed decision? And this is what John had to say. So in Albany, have you, what have been the obstacles that you've had in terms of these different issues that have come up that you would say, I need more help?
I think every citizen, I think, has a responsibility to do something to further the public good. And so I think every human should be political to some extent. So yeah, of course, voting is the first thing, and that's the thing that I always try to encourage people to do. I pass out voter registration cards to all the graduate students who come into my class every year. So in case anybody wants to vote in New York, they have an easy pathway to do it. At a more local and personal level, getting to know who your representatives and senators are. In the city of New York, it's an unusual system in that New York is full of political clubs. And so joining a local political club gives you access to other people who are interested and knowledgeable about politics, who are engaged. It gives you a chance to talk to representatives, especially at the state level. So if I, for example, belong to the Four Freedoms Democratic Club and I'm on the board there, and that club creates events where you can talk to knowledgeable people, you can talk to your state senator, your state assembly person. Very frequently, the representative Carolyn Maloney, who's our local representative, will come and talk about what's going on. Getting to know those people in person and talking to them about your issues is something that you can do that's really straightforward. Indeed, most people who are interested in government and who are officials want to know what their constituents are interested in and what they care about. So that's the first thing I tell people to do, is get involved in politics. In terms of humanism, I think one of the things you want to look for are local humanist and free-thinking groups where you can talk about politics and political issues. I think it's important for people to get involved in a local humanist group, for example, the Ethical Culture Society, which is where we're sitting right now, talks about issues that have political implications and the way government should work. The Secular Humanist Society of New York is another. At a more national level, the Secular Coalition, which has a venue both at a national level and in many of the states. The American Humanist Association is also becoming more politically involved, and they actually have a group called the Committee for Free Thought Equality. So seeking out those specialized groups and parts of humanist organizations and getting what advice you can get from them is really very useful. For example, the Committee for Free Thought Equality has an associated political action committee. And one of the things that they do is screen candidates and ask them questions that are of interest to people whose values are really secular. so they can identify people who have values that are typically secular and consistent with humanist principles.
Do they put those on the website?
And
or
those are on the website, and they're easy enough to find if you just Google Committee for Free Thought Equality, and you can look for people who are recommended. And there are also a discussion of issues. Likewise, the Secular Coalition has a booklet that talks about important principles and how they are expressed in government and government policy. And so you can get those booklets or read them online.
So John there is really talking about these different resources and booklets and pamphlets and clubs, political clubs. Like in New York, they have political clubs. There are political organizations all throughout. Obviously, the big two political parties have different events throughout the year that you can go to talk to your candidates. But to get resources, he mentioned that there are national organizations that are doing things politically. So if somebody wanted to learn a little bit more about an issue or join a local secular club that's maybe talking about politics from time to time, those are important things that people can get involved with. And he mentions AHA in what they're doing. Since you're the communication coordinator for the AHA's Center for Education, why don't you tell us a little bit about what AHA does for voting and for political education?
Sure. So I'm the education coordinator of the AHA's Center for Education. And while the AHA is nonpartisan, we do like to empower people to know about the issues and to be able to know that they are empowered to speak up and vote and make sure that they are in communication with their legislators. So we have partnered with UU The Vote and Secular America Votes to support our local groups in doing voter drives and for getting speakers available out to people about the issues. We do also work on certain legislation so that we are protecting people's vote. We're protecting people's right to separation of church and state, and we're letting people know about any of the restrictions or harm that may come to them or communities they care about due to some of the positions of our parties.
And I think it goes well beyond the separation of church and state. And I think you mentioned earlier when we were preparing for this phone call is that, there is this thing about the separation of church and state that's not only good for us that don't want a secular state or secular government, but it's also good for religion. Mm-hmm. And how do you view that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that, in order to find a government that works for all people, you need to recognize that we are very different people and we can certainly share in some essential values. And I think that personally, I think that the humanist values can relate to people of all religions and no religion or undecided, because we care about, empathy and altruism, service and responsibility. But when it comes to like the specifics of which groups of people are allowed to meet in big numbers during COVID, that shouldn't matter what your religion is, because it's still a danger no matter what those people believe, that those people are gathering in a time when it's unsafe to gather in large numbers, or when, a person is unable to be hired for a position or unable to marry the person they love just because someone in charge feels a certain way due to the way that a old text tells them to feel, as opposed to actually understanding the people that their decision is impacting, really kind of shows that the government isn't working properly. And we need to make sure that it's not just a religious versus non-religious argument, because there are a lot of minority religions that are also harmed by the majority religions getting all of the attention and benefits and ignoring the concerns and needs of other people.
And I think there's a big misconception that as humanist or atheist, secular minded people, that we want to do away with religion. We think society as a whole would be better if we focus on our commonalities, but there's certainly not a drive within the community to ban religion or to outlaw religion or to cause them to not be able to practice their religion. And I think that's a big misconception. I think that whether you're part of ethical culture or part of a humanist organization, you'll see that. You'll see that they say, do what you want to do in your home, in your temple, synagogue, church. Do what you want to do there. But if you want to come to my city council meeting or come to our city council meeting, I should say, because we're part of that community, or to the state house or to an event, having a prayer or having some invocation is infringing upon my right to not be indoctrinated or to have that service in a very public way that I have to participate in. Some people just say, well, you just be quiet, you don't have to put your head down, you just be quiet. I was like, well, that's not the point. Government is supposed to be secular, and we leave religion alone so they can do what they want to do. It doesn't mean that they should come into our businesses and government and do what they want to do. I mean, you've experienced that.
To that, especially when you're talking about like invocations at council meetings or even in, Congress, I think that a moment of silence would be great. Let's all just take a moment to breathe and reflect and get ready for the work that needs to be done. There are humanist invocations that we support and we help train people to give humanist invocations, which, don't focus on a deity or superpower giving us the strength. It's really kind of appreciating the people in the room that are doing the work to serve the people not in the room, or to serve the wider community that is connected with this body that's meeting. It's about our appreciation of the air that we breathe and the homes that we have on this planet that we have while we have it, in this one life that we have. And I think that those kind of broad messages of responsibility, appreciation, working together, like those are the motivating messages that will help us center ourselves to then deal with all of the items that have to be discussed and who knows how long of a meeting. But the particular quotes or religious dogma or threats from unknown supernatural being are going to distract us. And that's not to say that you can't use the Bible or the Quran or the Torah for great quotes. There is great poetry in a lot of religious literature, but you need to, just choose the ones that are actually broad and not make the assumption and saying like, we are all here because God has put us here to do his work. That really doesn't resonate with everybody and doesn't really focus us.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think that's important. And for somebody that's watching this, they're looking and saying, okay, well, I agree with that. I think that's pretty cool. And we wanted Moral Misfits to be that kind of place that when people do gather to watch Moral Misfits, or if they're at home watching it on like YouTube, that they realize that a secular humanist community where they can gather and share this one life together, that they can make friends and socialize, get to know their neighbors, their communities, they can invite their friends over, and that we do have this common ethic of having inclusiveness to everybody. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean when we talk about inclusive with religion, it's inclusive to allow them that we're all part of that same human family, and that we have things that we do share, and that's the things that we want to focus in on. And so we're hoping that Moral Misfits is that kind of place for people to gather. And you've been involved with ethical culture, grew up in ethical culture, and I've been a member of ethical culture in the past. And I find that as a great place that is more, what's the right phraseology? It's more communal, than some of these other groups, and they're very active at doing charity type work. So I think that's a resource for people. And as John was talking about voting and having those particular resources, one thing I really want to talk about before we get off this particular subject is really about that person who is apathetic or cynical. And in my mind, it comes down to, why are you apathetical? Why are you to listen to that particular person, try to empathize and understand them, to find a way to saying, I understand that you're cynical. I'm cynical too. You know, I have problems with the system the way it is. But it's also a chance for somebody to say, okay, I don't like the way things are. Can I move the needle one way or the other? Can I move it a little bit closer? I want to have fairer elections. I want my vote to count. I want it to be able to make a difference. And we could speak to that. I think as a secular person, atheist person, you know, I want, and I've talked to a lot of people, I want the elections to be fair, more open, talk more about actual substance instead of somebody's, you know, whether they're, you know, sleepy or small hands. You know, that gets us nowhere. Mm-hmm. But, you know, how would you approach somebody who is like saying apathetical or cynical about it?
I think you touched on it exactly, that like it would help to know where they're coming from in order to know the best way to address it and hopefully convince them otherwise. Because I can understand, you know, especially with concerns about gerrymandering and voter suppression, that someone is feeling like it's not worth the fight anymore. And of course, I would, in that case, remind them that we've had such a strong and long fight to get the right to vote that you don't want to like let it go and kind of dismiss or offend, you know, all the people in the past that have been working so hard to defend our rights. I can also understand that concern about, you know, as you mentioned, the parties aren't doing enough, or they're talking too much about the wrong things. I think that we were all, as much as we expected to be disappointed by the presidential debates, I think we were all maybe also like still a little more disappointed than we wanted to be. You know, and people have argued about what the best debating format is and whether there should have been more than just Republican and Democrat candidates available to debate. So I think that, you know, there certainly is that need to kind of figure out how much we can honestly expect from our candidates, how much we can push them so that they can become better. I mean, I do feel like something I look for in a candidate is someone ready to listen and learn to their party, to their constituents, to their opposing sides, to the experts in whatever field that, you know, that particular issue or legislation needs to hear from. I think that we sometimes maybe get a little distracted on things that have been said in the past and then feel like it is like that person is never going to be able to change and we should for always punish them for that. And maybe we should, maybe there are certain unforgivable things, but I think that, you know, not voting is really kind of just giving up your chance to have a say and giving up your chance to make a stand. Because when you don't vote, not only are you giving the other votes more power, but you're just going to be put together in, okay, so this is the percentage that didn't vote. And maybe people will like make questions, make assumptions or ask questions about that group. But in general, you're kind of like just people that don't seem to care about the country. And obviously, if you do care, you complain about anything in this country, then hopefully you see a responsibility to vote. I mean, I feel like voting is one of the simplest ways that we can support our democracy and be civically active. I mean, I remember as a child loving to just be able to go into the booth with my parents and like flip the switch. There's something really nice about the switches instead of the filling in the bubble. And even though I knew that it wasn't my decision, it was their decision, I felt like I was helping them. So I think that, you know, maybe it's a little bit more symbolic And I have been fortunate to be in cities where my vote was not like the determining factor. So there was, but I also was lucky to be in a swing state. I lived in Pennsylvania for a while, and it was really cool to be able to have people, the candidates, directly coming to us and like talking with us and fighting to like have us on their side. So I can understand some people being, in certain states being like, well, my whole state's going to go this way no matter what.
Yeah.
And then, it is, you hear those amazing stories about the small percentage of votes come that really kind of draw the line. But I don't think, we've seen our country change so much, and we would like it to change so much more. I think that we kind of need to stop feeling so stuck when it comes to our limited potential or limited impact on the country.
Yeah, I think people should not give up. It can be daunting, and it certainly is a frustrating enterprise. But I think you're right. It does not take a lot of time. It's great. I'm currently in Florida, living here. I registered. I voted. It was nice to sit down with the ballot and have the evening to go over the issues, look online, talk to a few people, get an idea about a sense of an issue. And I looked over the issues, and especially one party had said, okay, these are the issues that we want you to, and the way you want to vote. And I disagreed on one of them. And it's because I thought it was self-serving to the party. But, in the end, it's great to have that time. And you brought up some great points, and I hope that people become less cynical. They're probably going to still be frustrated. I don't think that we as humans we can say much about that. We're always going to have that, but hopefully over time we can make things better. And it really does take all of us to be able to make that work. So I want to go on to the next subject about what good is it, and talk a little bit about consumerism, about products, because we're really outside of this voting and this particular time is we're inundated all the time through social media, through TV, advertising, on the radio. We're just hit with advertising over and over again, and we're buying products, we're using products. Some of us might be buying too much product. Not that I'm an anti-consumerism person, but I do think that sometimes our stuff can overwhelm us a little bit. But it is frustrating sometimes to look at it in terms of a humanist way. And we see that there are now people who are starting to pay attention to about how do we get our food? How do we get our coffee? How do we get our chocolate? Is it fair for the grower? Is it fair for the communities that they get that? There's a lot now about cobalt and where it comes from in Africa, and there's child labor involved in getting cobalt for our energy needs and finding alternatives for that. But there also are resources for people, and I think that's important to understand that they are those, but understand what context there are. So if a person is looking at, let's say, the Better Business Bureau, they might not know that that's not a government organization. That's a private company that runs that, and to be a part of that, you have to pay a fee to join. They try their best to understand if a company is good or bad, but again, it's run by a company, and that is a certain context to say, oh, I'm going to check the Better Business Bureau on your company or what you're doing and see if it's nefarious or not and stuff. But you got to kind of take that with a little grain of salt, I think. And Consumer Reports is another private company, and they try their best to be objective. But what's their methodology? What products are they actually comparing, and how fair is that? Those are all really good questions. And then we try to turn ourselves over to government and say, oh, we got the EPA, the FDA, we got the Consumer Protection Bureau. We got government organizations that are trying to look out for us. it can be daunting for just an everyday consumer. And if I'm a humanist, I mean, how do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think also factor in where people live or how much money they have can greatly affect what they decide to buy. Maybe they don't have all of the organic options in their local store, or maybe they don't have someone, well, outside of COVID times, maybe they don't have someone at home who can, receive the packages for all of the things that they'd like to buy. I think that I do appreciate all the organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit, who at least try to help educate us on the different services and products that there are that we should be aware of. Like there's a lot more eco-friendly products out there that can replace a lot of our plastic waste. And there are ways to cut down on our waste by shopping at certain places that allow you to refill containers or buying in bulk. So I do think that it's important for humanists to become more aware and just try to figure out how to make adjustments. But I do know that when it comes to things like figuring out which businesses are LGBTQ friendly or
hostile,
or hostile, right? Or which ones are Black or Indigenous owned. So you like that takes a little bit more work, and sometimes that changes based on the staff changes of a corporation. So it doesn't. You kind of have to keep on your toes in order to stay aware. Like I know that I have stopped drinking certain beers due to the politicians that they support. And it's not a big deal for me because I'm open to lots of different beer flavors, but that would probably be difficult if I, lived with other people that really loved that beer or went to a local brewery that, was limited by that. I think that and then you also have all of as you mentioned with the FDA, all of the health issues. When I learned about what legal amount of arsenic is allowed in juice, that was a really interesting read that I had to absorb over a couple of days because you'd think that 0% should be okay. Yeah, lots of things.
Yeah, it can be daunting for a consumer, but I think for me, I'm kind of thinking about it. It's like, how do you eat a big cake? One fork at a time. You take a little bit at a time, and
right.
Maybe this week you're thinking about your toothpaste, and maybe in another couple of weeks you're thinking about your milk or your almond milk, where you get that. And I think one of the biggest benefits of having a community like a secular community is that it is, when you get 20 or to 30 people in a group starting to get to that size and stuff, you really start to be able to bounce off the ideas and the resources of that particular community, where some people have already thought about some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you, through conversation and having a good time on Sunday night, maybe before or after watching Moral Misfits, you can talk to your friends about it, and you can talk to your neighbors and see what they say about it. And you'd be surprised, because it has surprised me how much I've learned from other people who are different from me, who have different experiences from me, and at different times of their life they're focusing on different things. So at some particular point they may be talking about certain parts of what they bought and why they bought it and why they consume it and stuff. Lately I've been a little bit into chocolate because I love dark chocolate, and some guy got on, started talking about how it's medicine, for your body. And it's like, yes, I love all that. So, how much of it is true is a different thing. And then really sifting through where people are getting their chocolate, or is it sustainable? Is it fair to the people that are growing it, and they're able to make a living doing it? Because, is it really right? I mean, because there could be environmental impacts that are affecting the world through certain type of consumption. And I just don't want humanists to think it's just too much. It's just too much to think about. Think a little bit all the time. Think about your beer. It's like,
yeah.
where's this beer come from? Do I know the local owner of this brewery? And, is he, not hostile to my point of view of life, if he has one, and supporting that local community. And that is also part of consumerism, buy locally and buy from your people from your community, because that money comes back to your community. So that's why I want to talk about consumerism. You made amazing points, and
you mentioned about the chocolate. I wanted to jump in quickly. So at the Washington Ethical Society, I used to help teach a class of children about, and we used like this Harry Potter curriculum from the Unitarian Universalists that we kind of shaped a little bit to our program. But there's a part in there about learning about the children's slave trade with chocolate, and like the using children to produce chocolate. And so it was really interesting to, you get the kids excited by saying, yay, we're going to, do a lesson about chocolate. And we did let them like make and eat chocolate at one point, but also showing them like, here's where chocolate comes from. Here are the people that have to work, and, here's how much they get paid, and understanding, what is worse than just, oh no, I didn't get allowance, my parents are so mean. What's like, I am, be using my labor and not getting rewarded for it. And this can lead to bigger issues. And being aware of where each of the corporations stood. Luckily, some of them have changed their minds due to other people protesting. But we did like a letter writing campaign. So I think it was important not only to educate children, but to like let them know that they had a voice. That if you say to a corporation, we are disgusted by how you treat your workers, and this is not in any way how someone should ethically behave, and we will not be supporting you, like really using their, even a child's consumerism power was a really great lesson for them.
Oh, go kids. I think that's amazing. I can imagine the conversation that after that class, the child goes to mom or dad or their guardian, and it's like, was that ethically grown? Was that environmentally safe? Was any child labor used in that? It's like, It's chocolate. I don't know. But I think those are good conversations. It just makes us better people, I think, in the end. And that kind of gets us into the next part that I wanted to talk about. It's really about experts, about really listening and learning and trying to understand all these different things. We talked about voting, we talked about consumerism, but really as an individual, looking at the world and saying, how do I really understand this? I've had the fortune recently of being unemployed, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I look at a lot of stuff online, and YouTube is, I got a small YouTube addiction, and I look on there, but I found a lot of stuff that interested me a lot. And I start seeing some of these groups and these individual people that are really trying to give good content. But how do I know that that's accurate? How do I know that that's correct? Am I just being fed more of the same stuff? And that is part of the political landscape now too, but also just on a day-to-day basis, getting back to James Randi, it's like, well, you got to be skeptical about it. And it's like, yeah, how do I do that as a guy? And I'm just going to mention a couple of these. So the people in the audience, if they want to check these out, I think these are good. If you want to, email me, you can email me and say why they're not good. I'm sure some people are going to do that. But Answers with Joe, Joe Scott, he does his, and he talks a lot of different subjects, and he drills down. And one of the nice things is he's always putting links to the information he's getting. Same thing with Anton, who does What Da Math, DA, What Da Math, and it's mostly about astrophysics, and they did something recently about Betelgeuse. It's a star far, far, far away. and it's dimming, and they thought all of a sudden it was going to explode and we're going to have this supernova and it was going to be bright in the sky, and then it went away. He did like 5 videos on it, and it was just interesting to see how science was trying to figure this out. And again, he pulls up the actual papers and has the links to them. There's Dr. Becky. She's another astrophysicist. Everybody knows Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he does a lot of stuff on there. Veritasium. Those guys are amazing, and they bring a lot of different content, and so you can understand those things. There's this British guy who does Just Have a Think, and he talks about a lot of different diverse subjects, and I think that he's going through a mind process as a skeptic that people can understand, and he makes it very approachable to try to really understand a subject and to think critically, like James Randi was talking to us about. And there's 2 guys with COVID that I've been following and watching and listening to and stuff. Dr. Mike Hansen, he's a lung doctor, and he's been really showing a lot of the stuff that we're just not getting. He talked about autopsies of people that had COVID, and what the lessons they learned for that. And also Dr. John Campbell, a British guy, and he's talking about what's happening in the world and why they know things, and is certain medicines or certain combinations of medicine good. But he's again citing studies, peer review studies, talking about the size of the study. If you really want to understand that, I recommend that's a good one. When we were talking before the show, you watch or look on stuff on Facebook. I'm not so much of a Facebook person, but how do you look at all this stuff, and how do you decide, who's your experts?
I like how you mentioned about those people that are giving you the links and are, kind of clear about what their credentials are. Because I think that's certainly most important, that, you're not just taking their word because they said it, but you understand, where they're getting it from and who else is saying it and how you can learn more. Kind of goes back to just the idea of the scientific method. Is this repeatable, and can this happen under other circumstances? I have, I guess for better or worse, not been doing a great job of keeping up with particular individuals, but I do know that as Facebook has certain news items, or my friends and family want to spread information, I will check those out, and then maybe that'll get me to save certain videos or come back to certain profiles. I think that one of the, even though social media is sort of to blame for our lessening attention spans, it also is benefiting us in being able to absorb a lot of information in more entertaining segments. So you have, kind of really breaking it down into lists and, and points, so that I personally am not one who likes to get into long arguments with people, but I feel like I could, explain what I understood from a video or send them a link, and that kind of keeps the information flowing.
Yeah, we actually have a clip here. Again, a conversation I had with Mandesa Thomas last year. And if people want to go to YouTube and look up the conversation with Mandesa, we talked about a lot of different stuff. But here she's really talking about trying to understand things and how she views those things. And this is what Mandesa Thomas had to say.
Well, I consider myself very, very fortunate that I wasn't raised or wasn't indoctrinated with belief, which means that I never just took anything on faith, or I never just accepted something simply because it was told to me. I always tried to practice an evidence-based and also verifiable point of view, and also actions, meaning that I'm going to do some research and I'm going to make informed decisions, come to informed conclusions, and also and based on what has been proven to work, also the mistakes that some people have made and errors and what we can learn from them. Actually, of appreciating the scientific method, that it doesn't resolve itself in being right, but that, you take something, you test it. If it's right, it's right, and it's wrong. If it's wrong, you go back to the drawing board, and that there's always something new to be learned. And that informs my humanistic perspective, and also being able to look at things on a case-by-case basis, that we don't just paint things with a broad brush, that there are no absolutes really in this life and in the things that in our everyday lives and the things that we go through, that everything needs to be assessed and sometimes reassessed, not to the point where we're driving ourselves insane, but just
short drive for most of us.
Yes, but it is important for us to continue to make informed decisions, look at things from different perspectives, and then come to our decisions and conclusions from there.
What do you think is like a really good rule of thumb if somebody is being skeptical, or they're not quite sure of something and they want to take a humanist look at it? What would be kind of a rule of thumb that you would see for most people, especially in the community which you're serving, about how they should look at the world, how they should look at their circumstances, look at something, maybe even something very specific and stuff as a humanist?
Well, a good rule of thumb one thing that I found is helpful is to not beat yourself up over it, because there are so many people, we've been taught to think that we have to have all the answers to everything. And there are times where those answers may not come as quickly as we'd like them to be, and as we'd like them to. And so it is important for people to pace themselves, to take unlearning that indoctrination of religion as well as other thoughts can be a very difficult process. And so it's important for people to pace themselves, take their time, and you don't have to have all of the answers right away. Please do, evaluate your sources. Make sure you do know where they're coming from, and also have some fun with it as well. It doesn't mean that you have to be all serious all the time, but it's not a rat race, if you will, and also go at your own, be comfortable with it. Don't do it because you feel like you have to keep up with others. And in our community, we tend to be so intellectual, or we pride ourselves on our intelligence and how smart we are. But the ability to relate to people and also be understanding does need some work. And so what I found is that for people, if they're on their individual journeys, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know this, or I didn't know it, but I'll just continue to be open-minded.
So really, Mandesa there was really saying, it's like, take a chill pill. You don't have to really know it all. You don't really have to understand it all. That you don't beat yourself up over it. That you can use the community to understand things, and you can spend some time to understand it. And it's all right to not be the person who has all the answers. You, as a secularist humanist, you don't have to have all the answers for things that people come to you just because I'm a pro-science guy, or I'm a logical thinker, I'm a scientific method thinking person. Doesn't mean I have to have answers for everything. So it's amazing that she's saying, it's like, just chill out a little bit, you don't have to be an expert, and, take some time to understand that. And I think that was an important point about that. You work for the American Humanist Association. It's a national organization. They're also part of the Humanists International. And you also spend some of your time working for the American Ethical Union. And I want people at home to kind of get a sense before we leave a little bit about the work you do and why it's important to be part of these organizations.
So humanism has a full spectrum from, secular to religious, and I really love that I am able to be a part of that full spectrum and supporting the local groups that may be completely secular or may be more on the religious side, but all of them are striving to support humanists, agnostics, non-theists, like questioning people who want to still have that community where they can celebrate life passages, they can question the world, they can work together to improve the world, and they just want to, connect with people. And especially now during COVID, we're finding ways that they can connect online or in safe distance, but we're not stopping any of the work we do. In fact, we're probably putting more programming and articles out there. So with the American Humanist Association, I directly support our groups. I help forming groups and any of the challenges that come to the groups. I also have been working with my education team on educational training and different topics for programming. So we're doing both the live, anyone can join talks, but also the more intimate paid for courses, so you can really get into the material and have more of that one-on-one time with instructors. And I also do in expanding the education, working with our incarcerated humanists. And I've also been supporting our celebrants and chaplains who are able to, in a clergy-like capacity, serve the community. And then with the American Ethical Union, I have been working on their communications and also training some of the society folks to work on communication. So part of my job over the last couple of years has been fixing up the website so it is more attractive and informative, getting people comfortable with being on social media, because we know that social media and the internet in general is where people are searching for communities, even though they may walk by a building 1,000 times in order to actually feel like taking a chance and walking into that building. They want to see what exactly they're getting themselves into. And so they want to look online to get to know what events are happening, what people they're going to meet, what topics are going to be discussed. And similarly, they also have officiants who are there for baby namings, weddings, memorials. Having grown up in ethical culture, I experienced all of those ceremonies.
That's great.
I've been a part of a community everywhere that I lived, well, except for Australia, but that's a little far. So I really do value all of the work that I do because I know personally how much it means to people.
And you're doing great stuff. And when we talk about what good is it, it's very good. And I really appreciate all the effort that you do. Sometimes it's somewhat of a thankless job. So I want to make sure that I say thank you and for all the work that you do. This is a full-time job for you. So it's one of the few positions in the, let's say, cause that is a paid position and doing great work. We need more of that, and we need more people doing that. And I wanted to say, on behalf of the community, thanks for what you're doing. I really appreciate it, and it's good stuff. And thanks for being on Moral Misfits.
Thank you.